Welcome back to Wasting Time in the Woods. In this episode, we're getting full on lit by adding a bunch of custom lighting and a switch panel to the GX. We added so much lighting that, well, maybe I got a bit carried away.
Smoke! Too much smoke! Too much smoke!
Yep, we got a bit carried away. This episode is brought to you by Auxbeam. Auxbeam has a huge array of off-road lighting and electrical accessories for every possible off-road application. They make awesome solid-state electrical switch panels in a variety of sizes, and they hooked us up with this sweet lighting system and a switch panel that we're installing today. When you're ready to light it up, choose Auxbeam and let the frickin' moon know you're coming. All right guys, in this episode, we're installing a complete off-road lighting package by Auxbeam on our GX 460. So why would we need to light up the woods? Well, because it's frickin' awesome to go tearing through the forest in the middle of the night to get the jump on all the mall crawlers before they steal all the best campsites. Also, my kids have school on Fridays and Joe won't let me take Alex out every other Friday just so that we can hit the weekend early. Teachers. Adding an off-road lighting system will allow us to foray into the woods after dark without worrying about the chupacabra jumping out in front of the truck. Also, I live in Arizona where every third tree is actually an elk. An off-road lighting system allows you to more safely navigate obstacles and animals out on the trail after dark. Ditch lights allow you to see roadside obstacles and approaching animals sooner. Light bars let you blast farther down the road, and rock lights light up the area underneath the truck so that you can tear through nature around the clock. I mean, navigate through it. Now, it's obvious that you'll need lights for that, but why do you need a switch panel? Well, as you start adding more accessories to the rig, you'll find that most need a switch and a relay installed underneath the hood and in the cab. So every time you add a device, you end up trying to find a place to secure yet another relay and having to pull yet another switch through the firewall. By the time your build is settled the way you want it, your engine bay probably will look something like this. You don't want that. That's how stuff like this happens.
All right, well, I got all the stuff I need to survive out. So I'm probably just gonna camp here and watch it burn.
Switch panels take that rat's nest of switches and relays and consolidate it into a neat, tidy little box. The heart of our system is the Auxbeam 8-gang switch panel. It's a solid-state waterproof switch panel with two 30-amp circuits, two 20s, two 10s, and two 5s. It has a rad little control panel that mounts in the cab, and it's got an RGB backlight so you can turn the cab into a disco just like the outside of your rig. Each switch can be programmed to on-off for lights or a compressor, intermittent for something like a horn, and it can also be set to a strobe function in case your light bar wasn't designed to disco on its own. The controller connects via Bluetooth to their app so that you can quickly reprogram it or use a phone to control it. It comes with all the stuff you need to get started, like battery cables and a resettable circuit breaker. Auxbeam hooked us up with a light bar, a bunch of multi-function light pods, and a buttload of RGB rock lights. Now, I wanted to figure out how all this worked, so I tried to hook it up to a capacitor jump starter that I had. And no, it didn't ruin the switch panel, which is surprising. Don't do that. I think this would be a good time to remind you that I don't know crap about electricity. This video is for entertainment purposes only, and even if it's not all that entertaining, no-su. The best way to test this stuff is with a bench power supply that you can get on Amazon for 50 or 60 bucks, so I went out and bought one. The Auxbeam switch panel looks like this inside. It's got a couple of connectors in the back for the accessory trigger lead and a control panel. It also has a main positive and negative terminal to connect the power source. It's got fuses for each circuit and a bar of connectors to terminate all your wiring into. I set my power supply to 12 volt and then I started hooking up lights. In my install, the switch panel means that I didn't need relays or switches that the lights came with, so I just cut them off like the in-laws after a nasty divorce. Now, the Auxbeam 4-inch light pods I got are multifunction, which I love. If you give the yellow wire a pulse of 12 volt, it changes the mode. These lights can cycle through white, amber, or both, and they also have 3 built-in disco modes as well. Since any circuit on the switch panel can be set to pulse, I decided to devote one to just changing the modes on these lights, and I put the yellow wire into the positive terminal on a 5-amp circuit to control it. To install the switch panel, I wanted to use HDPE plastic because it's really heat resistant and easy to clean, and I thought it'd really hold up well in the engine bay. But it was 4th of July when I thought of it, so I couldn't find any, and I just bought a cutting board instead. I just cut it to fit the top of my fuse box and then mounted the Auxbeam switch panel control box and the circuit breaker to it using recessed hardware. I used heavy-duty 3M snap and lock to secure it. Now I can remove it as needed, maybe to flip it over and cut some lemon wedges on it. I couldn't get the lugs on the Auxbeam cables to fit over my battery post, so I crimped on new ones and added a terminal fuse. To connect the auxiliary power lead, I used the supplied add-a-fuse and dropped it in the rear wiper fuse slot in the main fuse box. To connect the control panel, I poked a small hole through this firewall grommet and shoved that wire through like Ace Ventura. To mount the control panel, I routed the cable up through these outside trim panels and then mounted the switch panel to this little AC duct cover. I used a pair of snippers to make a pass-through for the wire, and then I just drilled the bracket into the replaceable ducting cover using the screws it came with. To install the ditch lights, I soldered on waterproof connectors and made a harness out of the supplied wiring. I used a run-of-the-mill heat gun for the solder steel connectors, but using your wife's hairdryer is also acceptable. A set of Cali-Ray's ditch light brackets helped us mount a couple 4-inch light pods as ditch lights. Now, light bars provide additional forward illumination, and most people recommend mounting them as low as possible on the rig. Mounting them low keeps the illumination on the road and out of the next guy's dust cloud and rearview mirror. But I was feeling lazy, so I just stuck it on my roof rack like the rest of you. I had a Yakima Lighten Up bracket for my rack, which made it super easy to mount. I'm also a cheap bastard, so I used one of these floor cable channel things to route the cables up the windshield instead of an off-road version. I also used some Gorilla Tape for good measure to keep it in place. Did I mention I'm starting to look like Jake Blart, Woods Cop? Now when it comes to rock light placement, there's a lot of noise out there. The big debate seems to be between whether you should put one rock light per wheel or maybe skip the rock lights entirely and not look like you're trying to smuggle a discotheque into the forest. I chose one rock light per wheel. I'm kidding, rock lights can be really handy on the trail if you're wheeling at night. The Auxbeam kit that we got is great. The lights that they sent me are awesome quality with RGB plus true white, and they're in all metal, really heavy duty cases. But the coolest part is that unlike 90% of rock lights that are on the market, these daisy chain, so you don't have to run like 8 tails from the engine bay all the way back to your tailpipe. There's just 2 leads coming off of the control box for each side of the truck, and when you connect them end to end, it makes it a little easier to manage all the cables through the install. Surprisingly, these little bastards were the hardest part of the install. It's not Auxbeam's fault, it's just placing rock lights under the truck requires a ton of work to do it right. I think I could have made my own sliders in the time it took to install these. To mount the first one on the driver's side, I had to remove the battery and hug my fender for like an hour. This would have been easier with 2 people, but I don't have many friends, so I just do stretching exercises instead. I wrapped all the wires in split loom and tied them down with zip ties as I went. To mount the center ones, I whipped up some quick brackets out of aluminum and mounted them through the running board bolts. To finish it all off, I put the brain box on top of my battery using more snap and hook, slapped some stickers on the switch panel, took her out for a test drive. Yeah, my neighbors hate me, but you gotta test it. To get more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button below and turn on notifications. And the next time you're blinded by a laser beam of light in the woods, hold that middle finger back. It just might be your pal Jake, trying to find his way through a swarm of elk to the world's sweetest campsite. And you know, I'll have a beer waiting for you once I find it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you out there.